welcome to another episode of Gaming at the Round Table. I'm Crystal with Maverick and JoJo. Today I'm going to start it off by going into something that I actually want to kind of ask you, Joe. Do you feel like the graphics in games matters?
I got two ways to answer the question. One, just straight out, yes, it does. Just because for me, it also depends on what you're playing. To be fair to like certain genres of games.
True.
But my other thing is sound. So if the sound is really bad, it could be the most amazing looking game. But if the sound is bad, it destroys the experience to me. Because I think games a lot like movies. It's the whole combined experience.
Yeah.
So if one is really, really lacking, it could have an amazing story, but it's just not going to like keep you in it.
Mm-hmm.
But just back to the simple yes. So I've been playing games long enough that like I went from like block figures to like things that were like this big to, and I had mentioned this in a previous podcast with new seasons and new versions of games, and then it's seeming like it doesn't look any different to you. And that irks me because it's like this is supposed to be the newer thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it feels like I'm playing the same thing, even if it mechanically might feel a little bit different. So I think visually it's a big factor, at least for me. I don't know about for Mav.
Oh, smooth transition. I'm sitting here like, yeah, what does Matt wait?
What does that guy think?
So I think it's very context based. I had like a little list that I jotted down a couple of things. So style of the game, the quality of the game versus the quality of the graphics. So I would tie that into part of what Joe said, right? So the second bullet point, quality of the game versus quality of the graphics. If you have a graphical masterpiece, it looks like a movie, cinematic, realistic texturing on the face. And then you've got the old school movie delay in the voice lines where it's like a kung fu movie. It doesn't matter how amazing the graphics are, people are going to be pulled out of the world. And it also doesn't matter how amazing the graphics are if the thing is buggy as hell, right? Oh, it's amazing, it's beautiful. I've got it like 5 frames per second or something terrible.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to compensate there. So I agree. If I had to give a one word answer, yes, graphics matter, but I don't personally find them to be as important as the actual quality in the whole of the game. And I have a whole list, like the platform that you're playing on, the style of the game. For example, I don't care about graphics when I play tabletop RPGs. It's theater of the mind. So yes, there are graphics in many tabletop RPGs, even the traditional big shot, right? D&D, they have graphics in their books. And yeah, if I'm going to buy a book, I want it to look nice. But ultimately, I don't really care if I'm going to play the game and the book looks nice because I'm going to be speaking and playing theater of the mind anyway. To take it back into like video games, I still think that applies. I play tactical RPGs where they're little chibis on a grid moving, 2 squares at a time. Yeah, I like it when it looks good, but honestly, I can and have went back and played really old games and thought, yeah, this looks okay. This looks good. So I don't want to take up too much time and before we get to Crystal here, but I will say that there is a big thing that we could dive into about the difference between the aesthetic of the graphics versus the quality of the graphics. Because there are many aesthetics that I think look good for what they are. But I personally, I refuse to play Minecraft for the first like 5 years of its if its heyday, because I looked at it, I go, no, absolutely not. It makes me sick to look at Minecraft. Now I can play it for hours on end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like it's hard for me to say because I play some really
You could say it.
Low.
Ugly.
I said ugly. I don't think they're ugly. They're just low graphic games, right?
Hmm.
But I play a lot of cozy games. Um, but like you were stating, or both of you were stating, it like depends on the game, and it also depends on like the combination of things, right? I also genuinely love when games do low quality and high quality at the same time.
Hmm.
So like all of their characters are like these little pixelated characters, but then when they're talking, it brings up these absolutely stunning artworks of just like high quality masterpieces, right? And it's just like I love when they do the combination a lot. But I don't know. For me, I feel like we're all different in this, like the three bears or whatever, but I feel like graphics don't matter as much. Storytelling is very, very important to me, and sound quality needs to be at least not like, Joe Bob down the street did it. So, but I have lower quality or lower standards,
Lower
I guess.
standards, lower quality standards here. And that's
It's
fine.
like, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Um, Octopath Traveler. I don't know if it was Sony Square Enix, but they came up with this term that I think they like trademarked or something called 2.5D for a lot of their pixel games that are high definition. I think even upwards to 4K, but either way, they're very high definition pixelated games, but the resolution is really high and the color is quite robust. And I don't know, I'm not like that technical about it, but they look good, right? I can take a pixel game of today made by a major developer like the Octopath Traveler series and compare it to pixelated back in the day. And there are substantial differences.
Yeah.
And I like the way Octopath Traveler looks. I think it looks good and clean despite being a pixel game. So I definitely feel you on the like when they mix it
Mm-hmm.
and they do
Sea
it
of
well.
Stars was a game that I played recently and reviewed it, where they used both, and then their
Mm,
cutscenes and they had three art styles in one game, which I was taken back at first because I thought it was specifically just one, and
mm.
then I got like a clip of one thing, and I was like, "Oh, that was cool," and then I got a full on cutscene, and I was like, "What's going on?"
Was it like an animated short? Like,
Yeah, they had like the basic just little character. When you like moved around, you looked like Mario from back in the day. And then you had like little clips where they would show them talking, but it would be like a higher res photo of them when they're
mm.
talking. And then again, you'd have the cutscenes, which were full on like modern day cutscenes, where you're like, I didn't expect this to be a part of this. So I
That
thought that was
reminds
cool.
it's reminiscent of the old school RPGs where they knew the graphics were awful, so they would put in relatively high quality cutscenes. That was like the bread and butter of all the Japanese RPGs that came to America in the like late 90s, early 2000s. I remember a game called Xenogears, uh, and it looked okay for its era, but nothing compared to what we'd see now. But then you got to a cutscene, and it was like watching a scene from an anime. Just straight up, they took an anime scene and they just ported it in as the cutscene. And I think that really set the standard for generations to come as to you could do low graphic games. And as long as the story and the game itself was good, people would play long enough to get to those like mile marker rewards of not adrenaline, endorphin. You're like, oh, that's so cool looking. It's beautiful. Oh, I wish we could do the whole game like that. And now they have whole games that look that good, but we're not that impressed anymore.
I can give an example where the game was visually stunning, audio wise was just very up there, but the story just kind of made the franchise kind of fall apart, and that was Halo 5,
Hmm.
because it was one of their first new gen games. And I remember starting it, and like you start in the space and you literally see like the specks of like dust floating around, and
Yeah.
all the like you felt like you were in space. Like it almost felt like you were watching like the Aliens movies, where it was like this is intense, but the story was so subpar for a Halo series
Hmm.
that it lost a lot of their fan base.
Mm.
I got a question for you guys after Crystal says whatever she's holding here.
Now, I have an example of a game that did it well in all aspects of that of graphics, and that's Horizon.
Zero Dawn.
Horizon Zero Dawn.
Dang,
One of
that was
the
part of my question.
one of the best games. Anyways,
So the question is, what is a game, especially if you can think of one of the first games you recall, that did it perfect, where they balanced either good or bad graphics, really good or really bad, and they balanced it perfectly with the overall package of the game? One that
I
comes to mind. Oh,
oh
go ahead.
sorry, I have an old one. So one of the first games that I experienced that was just mind blowing for me was Final Fantasy 13, the one with lightning.
Yes.
Now I know a lot of people are not big fans of this game, but that was my first introduction to Final Fantasy, so I didn't have all the other games as like references. But Final Fantasy 13 was like absolutely mind blowing to me because the play was stunning, the cutscenes were stunning. She was stunning. Like the whole thing was just amazing. So that was my first experience. That was a long time ago. I'm gonna look that up while you go over yours.
I think Final Fantasy is a good series to use as a benchmark when you're using the topic of like visuals and like progression, because their stories are separate. It allows you to kind of look at it as a whole different thing. Whereas, like the example I used before with Halo, it's because you're used to a series of things.
Hmm.
So when there's a massive change in it, it takes away from what you're trying to like do. And
Yeah.
again, the Halo that I referenced was visually stunning. The mechanics were like solid overall. The sound again was spot on, but because it was so far off base from the original line, people just panned it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed. So on the flip side of that spectrum, one of the first two of the first games that I remember where it was at the time extraordinary graphics with a good gameplay, if not great gameplay. So, example one, which I think this is the de facto nowadays, but it wasn't back then. PS3 came out, and this is in the era of HD TVs coming out, and they came out with a couple of racing games. Now, I apologize to the audience. I don't remember exactly which racing game it was. So whether there
It might
Forza.
have been Need for Speed
it
What?
or
wasn't Need for Speed. I know that.
Gran Turismo.
Gran Turismo.
Gran
Yes,
Turismo,
it almost
yes.
for sure was that specific brand of racing game. When that came out on the first gen of PS3, on the first HD TV I had, I remember being like, holy moly. Like the reflection on the car and just the material. It was the first time I had seen in a video game graphics that rivaled reality at all.
Hmm.
Was vehicles. And nowadays, you could do 3D models as a hobby and you could crank out a realistic car like no problem within half a day and you could start from scratch. But at that time, it was mind boggling. Second example, more story based. Resistance Fall of Man, I think, is the name of the video game. Also, PS3 era. It was the first time people were seeing skin textures on video game characters. Again,
Hmm.
that's de facto right now, but back then it was one of the first times you had seen that. There are sporadic examples, but that game did it and still had a compelling story, still had an awesome combat system and a campaign modes that was enthralling. It was really well made for its generation, and it wasn't just, hey, look at our shiny thing on the new console. It's garbage, but it looks pretty. It was legitimately a fun game with good mechanics all around, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think the PlayStation 3 and 360 era was when there was the drastic leap when it came to visuals.
Yeah.
Because
Mm-hmm.
prior to that, the games were good, don't get me wrong. But when it came to like a full on visual difference, it was that era that started to really leapfrog it, where you were looking at games like, holy crap, like this is. And the game I want to say that like jumped it pretty big was Gears of War in that series.
Mm.
because the jumps that they made, and again, their storytelling is out of this world, and it led to a lot of other games that people don't realize came from that studio, Fortnite. But
Epic Games, yeah.
so when you look at their Unreal Engine, all the stuff that they made from that series, they're a grandfather in a massive way when it comes to visuals and how things are mechanically put together, and how they. I think they were the ones that introduced the ragdoll mechanic. I mean, it was pretty glitchy where you would see like people flopping around like fish after they like got shot or something, and you were like, "Why is that doing that?" And you're like, "Is it still alive?"
Who was the other major competitor back then? Because I remember seeing like Unreal Engine and it was just everywhere. And no one knew what engines were, mind you. Like now, Google and internet is huge, but like you'd boot up a game or something and it would be like Unreal Engine and made with, and literally no idea what the hell that meant. Like none, zero.
I don't think I
Now,
even paid attention to
I
it.
think the other engine that stuck out to me was, I believe it was a Frostbite engine, and it was based on a series. It's not Band of Brothers, but it was that feel of a game. And they had, what was it? It wasn't Bad Batch. I'll remember the name at some point. But they had a series, and I remember seeing their engine name being the Frostbite engine.
hmm.
And it was like one of the first games where like your environment was completely destroyable. So like when a tank shank when a tank shot something at you, like you would see a tree splinter and go all over the place. And prior to that, like that was unheard of in a game. Like you could watch a movie and they had like special effects, but in a game when that got put into things, and like you could toss a grenade and then somebody thought they were safe behind like a wall, and then the wall just went pfft.
Oh, the destructible
Yeah, environment.
environment. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to that part of the conversation with the technology progression. It's hard to like not focus on that, having experienced it through. But the graphics, to kind of tie us back into the first topic, I asked, what's an example of like one of the first games you saw do it really, really well, especially on the higher end scale? Let's talk about examples we can think of where lower graphics, but they did it flawlessly uh, as a whole. So I listed a couple examples already. So just to get the minds going, Minecraft is a good example. Its gameplay loop is very addictive. We've got World of Warcraft, which I personally abhor the graphics on. So it's not my example, but according to the gaming community, a lot of people still play World of Warcraft. It's obviously a very successful franchise despite being hideous. Shots fired. So there are examples out there. The Octopath, I would say that's low graphics. I mean, pixelated. In fact, I'm going to go out and branch and say most retro style 2D scrollers and Castlevania games that are coming out, any of them that have popularity, are doing it well. They're taking low graphics and they're making a gameplay loop or story or both that just brings it all together.
I think a lot of the cozy games do a really good job with it too.
What's
Like
a cozy
Stardew
game?
Valley.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, like Stardew Valley, or there's a new one that just came out. Something Amistia or something. I can't remember the name right now. I've been meaning to try it because it looks really good, but it's another one of those like small pixel character type games where
What's another game like Stardew Valley that you were playing with our online friends?
um
I know you've gone through at least 3 where you guys like binged the heck out of them.
Animal Crossing.
There we go. Animal Crossing for sure.
The
Animal Crossing, I
original
don't.
Final Fantasy 14.
Say
That
again?
was the original. I think it was a Final Fantasy 14 when it first came out. Was graphically pretty. It was the first massive multiplayer game that I played on the 360, and I just remember like graphically, it was like very simple.
I can't. So this is testing my memory. I can't remember if the 360 had 11 or if it had 14.
I'm pretty sure.
Because both were big MMOs, and 11 was definitely not not good looking.
I don't
It
think
could
it
have
was
been.
14 because 14 just came to Xbox a few years ago.
Let me Google it, but I'm just mentioning that because that for some reason stuck to my brain.
Now, I will say something that's really cool about Final Fantasy 14, since I'm a lover of it, is that they upgrade
It
their
was 11.
graphics over time. You know,
You said it was 11, Joe?
Yeah.
WoW
And
should learn from that.
what if WoW did, and we're just such haters that we don't even know that they did?
Man, I can
I
tell
mean,
you
they've
right now, I'm going to get
upgraded
on that
it, but
game.
in comparison to newer engines,
Mm-hmm.
it probably doesn't look the same.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
tried
don't want
so
to harp
hard.
on them, right?
I wanted to
This
like
is
it.
supposed to be a positive podcast.
It's
What?
mostly positive.
I can say like the 360, not 360, but N64.
Yeah,
That's
like the
when,
whole generation.
yeah, and I remember playing Mario compared to the original Mario and how drastic of a jump visually that was. I mean, if you look at it now, you're just like, how did they get away with that? Because you're looking at it again 20 years down the line, but as a kid sitting there and playing those games and being able to move around compared to like across,
Oh, the three-dimensional aspect. Yeah, that's a whole
and
other
then the
part of
visual
graphics.
fact
Yeah.
that there was like a massive background you could see off in the distance, like I think that ties into the visual. Does the visual matter? Because you add in this grand feel of things where you have where I think one of the topics that you mentioned was about open world games and how that like affects or the style of the game.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the difference between the original open world games and like today's open world games where you just wander off and you end up in Narnia if you want to, compared to open world back then where it's you eventually hit like a wall. And you're
An
like, there's
invisible
nothing
wall,
there, but I
literally.
can't go any further.
Yeah, you touched on something that's actually really, really pertinent to this conversation, which is the concept of 3D versus 2D. In my opinion, today, the standards that we hold for graphics in a video game are directly related to whether or not it is a 3D game or a 2D game. If I look at a three-dimensional game, especially open world or whatever, and it doesn't look top notch, I instinctively go hideous, probably B grade, C grade, like indie developer, low budget stuff. We're indie developers, no harsh feelings. But like 2D, if I look at a 2D game, I go, well, maybe it's just the vibe, right? I feel like we're a
Yeah.
lot more forgiving for 2D games graphics than we are for 3D game graphics.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. What is Hades?
Hades is 2D and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they will roll on us so hard if we
Oh
bad
no,
mouth.
I would never badmouth literally any game that's made by the company that made Hades.
Give me a second. They'll come back to me. Big little
Bethesda?
giant.
No.
No.
No. Bro, I said that and it felt wrong.
No.
No.
Super Giant Games.
There we go.
They're phenomenal. The artist, I think she goes by Gen Z, and she's fantastic.
That's unfortunate.
Dude,
I'm
this
sorry.
You like get their name wrong completely, and then bash
I
on
didn't
their
mean to get their
artist.
name wrong. First of all, they are some of the most talented people I've ever seen in my entire life. So just to correct that, I'm not trying to talk bad about them. I genuinely love their style.
I will pitchfork go over to your
Hades
You
office.
ride at dawn.
Hades alone. I mean, I haven't played any of their games, but I have seen a lot of the artwork from their games, and it's mind blowing. I loved. He was playing Hades recently, and you could see like the hands coming out of the lava or the fire on the sides, and I just thought that was so cool how they did that, and like just a lot of elements, the small things that they put in that aren't overshadowing to the actual platform. It's just I could go on and on about their art style. It's really, really good. I just need to remember their name.
We'll splice all those complimentary things and we'll smash it together with the who are these people? Never heard of them.
I want to go back to
Trash.
what Mav mentioned as far as it being based on the game type,
Hmm.
because one of our things says like Beat Saber, and if you look at that, like fundamentally, it's very very simple, and it's like okay, it's not anything too serious, but it's because it fits the game type. So
Yes.
if you have, there was one game that literally was stick figures that you guys showed me not too long ago, where like they freeze time.
That's on our list actually. It
Super hot.
is super hot. Yeah.
I mean, when you guys
It's not
showed it to
quite
me, I
stick
was like,
figures, but it's there.
yeah, I was like, what are you showing me? I thought it was literally like a game engine test type thing where you
Right.
were like,
And it
oh,
looks like
It
one.
looks like it,
where
yeah.
you guys were like, oh yeah. I'm like, this is an actual game. I was like, there's no way.
And it's
They're like, no, no,
good.
it's like it's a good game. And then they were showing me a clip of it, and I was just like, there's no way.
That's we could have a whole different podcast about games that are like atrocious to watch and look so boring, but when you're the one in the driver's seat, it's
Um,
like you're injecting drugs. You're like, I'll stop in 5 minutes for 10 hours straight. That is one of those games. When you look at Super Hot, it looks awful. Even watching gameplay, not just the graphics, watching the gameplay, you're like, it still looks boring as heck until you're the one in the funny position trying not to get shot playing it's a VR game for anyone that's not familiar, that stops time when you stop moving, and that's the whole shtick. So there's all these little stick figure like entities trying to kill you, but you can stop time as long as you aren't moving, and it's really addictive, very fun. Beat
um,
Saber, one more topic, I promise. Beat Saber, I wanted to give Joe credit. He mentioned very early on in this conversation that not Beat Saber, but games often get impacted by their audio.
mm,
So graphics can be accentuated or de accentuated, if there's a term for that, based on the audio. And Beat Saber falls into that category. It is not a beautiful game, but the music and the way they do it together with the addictive game loop really makes it perfect.
and on that point, there's also something that you and I were talking about recently, Maverick, is Tetris. How
Uh,
Tetris added some like house music, like
The newer versions.
there's a specific. It's probably not
God.
made by the original
Tetris
Tetris.
Effect, I
Yeah,
think is
Yeah.
what
Tetris
it's
Effect.
called.
It's a beautiful looking game. I've seen some YouTubers playing it. I refuse to buy a Tetris game just out of
You want to have
fundamental.
something get stuck in your brain? Play Tetris, because I
Yeah.
played it like throughout the years, and I remember the last time I played it. I remember laying in bed and seeing patterns in my head, and was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, no, no.
Oh
There.
my gosh.
Yeah, Tetris Connect is. I think that was the name. I can't find it
That's
now. But
another one. Yeah.
Effect. Tetris,
Tetris
Effect.
Tetris
Effect.
is actually a game that my wife Adelie loves playing, and I literally bought a version of it just to play it with her because it was a game she liked playing.
Have you tried this one that we're referring where it's heavily with it has music and like visual overlays on top in the background going. It's like you're taking acid and playing Tetris.
It
If you
might
haven't
have been
tried
the
it,
one, but I think the last one, if I remember correctly, again, this was a while ago, was Tetris Connect, I think, or something inside of that realm.
okay.
Speaking of Connect, Fruit Ninjas.
The mobile
Yeah,
game where you like
yeah,
chop.
where it's literally just a fruit pops up and you chop it. Like visually very just simple, clean little whatever, and then just and it gets cut in half. That's
Huh.
it.
Wait a minute. What was that game I recently sent you guys? I'm looking it up really quick.
We send each
It
other a
was
lot of games.
it was in the top it was in the top games currently.
Okay.
And
There's
it
a
was
few that
called
I would never like.
Bananas.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
And all
Yeah.
it is like a clicking game, but it's like one of the top played games right now, and all you do is click a banana.
I mean, I'm really, really, really gonna date myself, but there was like a Mario Art something like I think it was on the Sega Dreamcast, and you literally the mechanic was you had a fly swatter, and you had to swat flies.
I remember this. I
It
hate
was
that
the
I
most
remember this.
addicting thing ever. It was like Duck Hunt, like the middle-aged Duck Hunt. it literally was like a fly, and you just
Yes.
hours just
Oh my
smacking
gosh.
flies.
So we started the conversation with graphics absolutely matter, and we ended with I would smack a fly on a screen repeatedly if it's fun. So I don't think there's a definitive answer. I feel like we want to say they matter, and they do matter,
They do.
but it is specifically centered on everything else about the game makes it whether or not the graphics matter. I think that's
Yeah.
the simple answer.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it all.
Right on time too.
Yeah. And
Cool.
on that note, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you again for watching another episode of Gaming at the Round Table. I'm Crystal with Maverick and JoJo, and bye.
See ya. I don't ramble.